How's it going? I have the windows open. There's dogs barking in the background. It was like 31 degrees in London today. I spent most of my day in a lovely air-conditioned classroom studio at Point Blank. I've come home after 8 hours of talking about sound, and I had some food. I had some vegan ice cream. Had a shower, not in that order. I can't remember what the order was. It's not important. What is important is I figured I'm going to do a video. I'm going to try something different. We are getting a beer, so I figured why not get a bit drunk. I mean, I'm not going to get drunk on 4.3 one can, but I don't drink much anymore, so probably going to get a bit heady, I imagine. So yeah, Beavertown neck oil. It's fine. Just something from Sainsbury's. Now you can buy that everywhere. So I'm going to carefully bring. This is probably a bad idea. I've had a few sips, trying to get everything set up. Nothing was working. We're going to start from scratch. I've got the Mackie mixer over here because this thing hasn't got any fucking EQ, and it drives me nuts. And as much as I try to do videos or do stuff in the Rytm, I always just want to reach for that EQ. And, just buy a mixer or just put an EQ on, so it's fine. This is like a really standard thing. It's just like bass, mid, and high. So there's not even anything fancy. Out of shot, I've got bass drum. Well, here, bass drum, snare drum, and then the stereo. Well, two monos panned because the camera is the effects. So I've got the effects separately. I'm going to make something from scratch. So I don't want to be here forever. I've got to prepare for a lesson tomorrow on a Saturday, which would be fun. So I'm going to spend the morning talking about that. That person's possibly listening to this video. So, hey, how's it going? So, yeah, let's not muck around. So also I thought this is a chance to just kind of go through a little bit like how I start stuff or how sometimes I start stuff. So, that standard kick drum that you always boot up with, or kind of when you reset your kit. What I like to do is put in a sequence. Is it this way around? Yeah. I like to put in a sequence that's just like a bit like the SH101, right? You can just key in some things. So it's like record and stop, and then you can just put in some really carefully thought out notes. I don't like that last one. So let's go through number 5. Let's do really low. There we go. So my point in that is to have sort of some extremities. So and why I do that, so the first one's C3, and then the second one's B3, and then we've got C2, and then we've got B4, and then we've got C#1. So what I like to do, and in the description below, I'm going to hit my microphone low so that I know. In the description below, there's going to be like the document for the keyboard tracking math, and this is what basically I do when I use that. So C3, I'm going to have to kind of move my hand out of screen. So that document C3 is 64. So I go to the velocity, change that to 64. And, while you're doing this, you could have a sip of beer. Just that little preparation. B3, we got 86. So if you want, you can open that document, follow along at home. Isn't that what they do? C2, let me reach across here. Where are we? 40. Maybe you start remembering these numbers, but I never do. B4, so that's really high. 110. And then C#1, which is right at the top, is 18. So the reason we're doing this, or the reason I'm doing this, because you're not doing nothing, you're just watching, but the reason you might want to try this is we can assign, like this thing hasn't got keyboard tracking, unlike the A4, which I believe has, and some of the other stuff has keyboard tracking. So we can track parameters across the pitches. So a low pitch versus a high pitch, we can now track that. We've had to define it as opposed to just turning a dial, so it'd be really nice if this had that, but it doesn't. So this is what we got. So we can assign our settings to something. So velocity mod is what we want to go into, but velocity to volume, I turn that off. I mean, you can have it on, but I just want to have the volume consistent. And we're using we're using this velocity to assign those notes, right? So we don't want the pitch, we don't want the volume keep jumping up and down. We want that consistent, but we want to be able to use that velocity to control something. So in this case, we can decide it here. So velocity mod, and by default, it's got like meta, which is nothing, and then the filter frequency, the filter resonance, and another nothing. So we can turn up the frequency one if we want. And this is how much we're going to be modulating. It feels like I'm in point blank right now. This is turning up how much we want to modulate it. And then we can go back here, turn this down so we give it some space to move. And then we can listen to what we got. See what I mean? So we've got some expression there. So we can do that, and that's just a kick drum. Then we might want to change the sound. So just for a change, I might use the BD plastic because it's a good one. And I like using the bandpass filter. Now I like using the bandpass filter in this machine. I typically use like the low pass filter or high pass filter. The bandpass filter in this is really good because it hasn't got EQ. So it means I can have this filter moving up to high frequencies and low down to low frequencies with just one sound. So that kind of removing the mud or removing the bass or whatever it is kind of happens, because if it's here, we have no bass, we have no high, we have some mid-high. We're here, we have highs, we have no mids and basses. And here we have basses and we now have no highs, right? So you can get like a really good, interesting kind of sort of full frequency range of stuff just by using that filter. So this is cool. Let's turn this down a little bit. So now I can adjust the amount. So already, right, you can hear a bit of bass and a bit of high. So that's really quick. So now we've already got some sort of rhythm. I might slow this tempo down because I was just testing the distortion, doing some gabba beats, but yeah, 100A. Let's go for 100A. So the other thing I like doing is listening to that sound and then deciding, like, you know, how long I want those notes to play. And at the moment, they're all open. So none of this is, as I'm clicking through, none of these are set to the length. And I have my envelopes on auto, so I can kind of change this. And we're not hearing a massive difference here because I've got a release on. It's a bit more solid. That's more plucky, stabby, which I personally prefer. Let's turn this up as well. The other thing I want to hear is like a bit of resonance. And you can start hearing crunch, which is quite cool. So now I might turn to like the envelope. So I want to have a bit more stab, like sweeping that filter around. So let's turn these envelope settings down. And now we got a bit of a bassy kick, which I can turn up with my EQ because we have one. Should we want to? But you know, it's only sounding okay without, so we'll leave it off for the minute. I'll end up not using it, won't I? So that's kind of cool. Then we could play around with the modulation, right? So let's take this record off so I don't accidentally delete stuff, because that often happens. And I can start playing around the amount that frequency is moving around. So you can see it, right? This is going crazy as we hit each step. It's kind of moving up and down, and we've got the numbers that we just put in are displayed, and then we can sort of assign to what degree that moves up and down. This was still going to move to the extremities, but this is going to be what it affects. So this is the modulation that we've set, and this is what it's modulating, in this case, the filter. So all these other three are empty, which we can use for other things, which is cool. And that's better. So now we might like to do other things, like what I like to do is turn a parameter. Oh, that already sounds good. Okay, well, let's turn a parameter, a blank one, and then we just scroll through and see what happens. So our LFOs aren't doing nothing, but now we're in the drum sounds. bass. This is the source sound tune. So I think it's time we reach for effects, because effects fixes everything. But also, let's have a sip of beer, because I think I was about to say something else, but I feel like I should have one. Hang on a second. That was quite good. Because we can't get drunk if we don't drink beer, do we? Yeah, this is definitely going to go to my head because I'm old and drink tea. No, I drink coffee, but effects. So let's add some effects. So the reason I go to effects pretty quickly is not to create a sense of space, although it does do that. I've just realised my ring's not on. That's because I had a shower. It's not to create space, but to use put sound into the effect, so I can hear the effect. Can I hear the sound influencing the effect to the degree of the frequencies, right? So with a reverb, if you have a click with no reverb, you just have like a less audible click. I mean, you can hear it, but when you put that click for reverb, you can really hear the frequencies of that click. So that's just a very, very small sound. But obviously we've got a bit more of a complex sound. Putting that through reverb or effects, we can start to hear really different frequencies. It's almost like emphasizing the frequency ranges through a kind of, through an effect, as opposed to like situating a sound in space, which is often what reverbs and effects are used for. I like using them more structurally, so they're integrated into the sound in some way. So let's see if we can kind of do that. So you can already hear, if I turn this down, because they're on two separate dials, we've kind of got some like obvious pitches that we really didn't pick up on before, and the quality of the reverb's going to create some like sort of off notes, if you like, some kind of odd harmonics or sort of dissonant feeling, edginess, whatnot, based on the frequencies of the reverb, based on the algorithm of the reverb. So what was like a really clean, precise sound, as opposed to having a really clean reverb that just spatializes it, we're using it, like I say, as a kind of emphasis of those frequencies. And I like to EQ the shit out of my effects. So let's use the EQ first as it is. I like having this on pre, because it's just much louder based on where the signal flow is. So let's have a little play around with getting this reverb somewhere interesting. Pre-delay. I love pre-delay, again for the rhythmical quality, so we're adding a bit of space before the sound. And at this point, we're not going to hear it because we haven't got the dry sound. So let's put the dry back on. And I like having them like really delayed. So like there's a huge, like the sound hits and there's like almost the next sounds are hitting. And then we hear the reverb from that first sound. So it's almost like a half a bar long. So you can create this kind of sort of interesting rhythmical kind of catch up in a way. And using that pre-delay, you can almost get it into certain frequencies. It's kind of serves the purpose of what like a hand clap might be if you're using drum machines, or a hi-hat might be if you're using that. So I quite like that. I also like my effects way louder than the source often. So there's some interesting stuff in there. So the other thing we can do, so we've kind of got the reverb in some sort of interesting spot, and we're kind of playing around with some of the modulation, is to get the delay out. And again, I use the delay for the same reasons I use the reverb, right? It's kind of structural, but in a different way. So with the delay, we have this thing that often is the case, like students often ask this, can I sync it to the tempo, main tempo, or like within the analog rhythm, like all the kind of delay is sort of synced to the tempo of it, which, you know, is really handy. But the world I come from, which is like hardware, separate effects boxes, separate clock, separate synths, you know, it's not all in one box. Like nothing's in fucking time, or you might have to tap it to get it in time, or you might have to key in the number or use a rotation to key in the number. So when you're going through the presets or going through your settings, it's not normally in time by like automatically. It's normally out of time, and everything's kind of slightly off in some regards depending on your MIDI chains and all kind of factors that just make hardware just a little bit more a case of like trying to bring it in time should you want that, as opposed to making it out of time, which you need to within a lot of modern stuff. You know, it's not good or bad, but I come from a background that working with stuff that's out of time gives you more interesting sounds. Working with stuff in time gives you a very locked in, like, basic use of a delay, which I'm just not into it as much. It like produces a really clean sound, which I just like something a bit sloppy, or a bit too, like a bit late, or a bit too early, or really off, and just kind of use that delay to kind of make different patterns and different sort of textures. So as you can't stack in stuff up, lots and lots of delays, they start creating different textures and cancelling each other out and boosting things. So that's what I'm going to do. So to do that, you need to go into your effects and you need to put some triggers down. So no idea why the Rytm allows you the minimum of 2 and not 1. I don't know. I think it must be like a timing issue or like a CPU issue. But anyway, we need to put a couple triggers down. We go into the LFO section. We set this to 1. We set this to 0. So we're not well, it can be set at anything but 1, you know, because it looks tidy. And then we set this to saw. So what this is going to do is this is going to map like the tempo, or what we're trying to do is map the tempo or the speed of the delay across this saw wave, and then we can kind of scan across it with this if we want, or we can scan it using the depth. So how much up this thing is it going to go or below? You can use any waveform, but I mean this is a better practice because of that phasing thing. So drop this down to delay time. I put my delay time to the smallest it can possibly be. If you wanted it smaller, you could like make your tempo quicker because it's locked to the tempo. So if you go really, really fast and half your sequences if you want. I've done it. You can get some kind of chorusy, flangey stuff, but it frankly doesn't go quick enough to do what I want, but you can kind of get there. Yeah, and then we'll add some delay. So already we've got some short, sort of chorus-like kind of settings, and then we go to our timing. Sorry. The other thing we need to do is put this on the trig. So it triggers every time of those steps. I forgot to do that. So now we can do much more gradual tempo changes that we can't do with that one because it's much bigger steps. So we're kind of like getting in between, you know, because we've got like 1/28th and then 1/64. So that's like a huge leap, whereas this gives us all that in between spot. So I like to have a bit like the reverb, having a texture, having it up on sort of cut the lows off, turn this up. I like to put my feedback up quite high-ish, and then I like to use the filter, or the distortion section I should say, because it's with the effects line, to turn up this delay overdrive. We kind of get this metallic thing, so sometimes you want to bring the highs down, find a sweet spot, and then we can kind of play around with this and see where we end up. So you can hear as I sweep that filter down, we're kind of getting the frequencies of the buzz of the BD plastic sound source kind of coming up in different places. So as it's kind of being cancelled out with like the overlap of the frequencies set for the delay, whereas things are delaying and overlapping, as we sweep down, those frequencies appear more because we're cancelling out other things. It's kind of like almost like a masking technique. I don't know if you've ever heard of masking, but like you kind of essentially use one sound to block out another one. So I guess like the easiest, like closest equivalent might be like if you hear really heavy bass and you can't hear other stuff around it, like in, not in a track, but in like a heavy bass in a club or heavy bass in a car or something, you just kind of, it blocks out other frequencies. So it's kind of a similar technique, but just in all areas. And then we can send obviously the delay into the reverb, and we've got that reverb set up as a pre-delay already, so we can start building that texture into a texture, and then we feed back the original reverb should we want to do that, all that kind of stuff. So let's try that. And then at this point, it's not amazing, but it's kind of just like mucking about. We can start playing around with like maybe the filter a bit more, the shape, the modulation stuff we set up, and kind of see where we end up. So yeah, that's good. I finished my beer. What'll be 34 minutes? Seems like a good place to stop. That might have got clippy. I don't know. Everything was redlining on the OBS, so hopefully that's come through. But you know, that's what happens when you drink beer and don't care. I need to go and prepare. I've just realised if I drunk beer and I need to prepare, that's a really bad combination. Yeah, I'll be fine. Cool. I hope that was helpful. I hope that was interesting. I don't think I need to share the project, right? Because you just saw me do everything from scratch. So just do it yourself, right? Just kind of go through those steps, create, play around. That stuff at the end was really just, you know, blended between the mix of the delay and the reverb, playing around with the frequencies, bit of on the EQ here on this, what seems to be a more crackly Mackie than it was last time I used it. Yeah, just playing around. Sounds good. Sounds good enough anyway. Good enough for a Friday. Nice one. I will catch you in the next one. Cheers.